how's it going today, folks? I thought that just before starting today's discussion, I might as well just play a little music, just to set the tone. But, I don't know, I think I'm just gonna randomize it, why not? I don't want to keep you guys waiting.
Isn't it rich? Are we a pair? Me here at last on the ground, you in midair. Send in the clowns. Isn't it bliss? Don't you approve? One who keeps tearing around, one who can't move. Where are the clouds?
No, Max, wait! No, please! No!
Goodbye, Joker.
No, Bruce!
Just when
Don't
I'd
leave
stop,
me! Please!
opening doors,
I need you.
finally knowing the one that I want. Tonight's the night I'm coming alive. You've lived in my heart all of my life. You're a part of me, I'm a piece of you, irresistible you. What will we do?
Get ready for the encore.
Searched my soul for the sake of letting go, but it's you I need, irresistible you.
Well, now that my emotional crisis is over, hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Sam once again on the ElectroNuke Mods channel, and I'll be following a bit of a different format in this character discussions video, as well as other future character discussions, because after all, I'm sure you want to see visuals other than just mute gameplay footage for 30 minutes. Also, it's just that a lot of people just don't really seem to care and get a lot of shit wrong, just like they tend to do about a lot of things in the franchise. And, yeah, so... Oh yeah, but that reminds me of, Flame Scratchcom saying, talking about Black Doom in their Shadow the Hedgehog playthrough, which I haven't watched for years because I hate those guys.
Shut
then again,
up!
it's a strong word. So hopefully the webcam footage, images, and video you'll be seeing along with the gameplay footage should add some nice spice and variety to the rest of the series. Now, on the subject of the character I'll be talking about today... Let me tell you about a man I once knew. Pathetic man. A loathsome man. A man who commit horrendous, inexcusable acts toward the rest of mankind. With a smile as wild and grim as the twilight horizon. Today I'm gonna talk about a demented excuse for a clown. A clown you may recognize as the Joker. Oh, wait, I'm not 21 yet. Yeah, it's no easy task naming a villain as legendary and influential on pop culture as a whole as Batman's arch-nemesis, the Joker. Well, I mean, unless you count Darth Vader, obviously. As a matter of fact, Joker can actually be considered as the exact opposite of Batman, as instead of being a cold, stoic guardian who places extreme limits on himself, the Joker is instead a wacky, comical, flamboyant, and absolutely maniacal supercriminal who places absolutely zero limits on himself. Just to add fuel to the fire, while we know exactly why Bruce Wayne became the Dark Knight, there was no clear origin story to the Joker, and as a result, he doesn't have any clear motivations to many of his crimes, which consequently causes him to border on being a complete and total anomaly. What makes the Joker such a fascinating and haunting character in my eyes is that he isn't quite an anomaly. He does give motivations to some of his crimes, and there's almost certainly a very human explanation as to how he became who he is. We just don't know exactly what that is yet. And after all, you really do have to think about what kind of hell a man would have to go through in order to become this.
Bring the car around. We're going for a drive.
In this character discussion, I'll be going over who the Joker is in my eyes, some of my favorite comic stories involving the Joker, and some of my favorite Joker origin stories throughout the years. The final segment of this video will be in regards to the live-action interpretations, how I've ranked them, and for what reasons. You might want to prepare an angry mob, though, because I'll also be going over why I much prefer this version of Joker. Over this one.
Dental, clothing is custom, no labels.
Alright, but please folks, try to save that angry mob for at least a few more minutes. Now, with that being said, let's begin.
Let's get this party started.
Now, like I said, I'm going to start off this discussion by talking about how I personally see the Joker. Because obviously, in the, 80 plus years that Joker's been around, everyone's gonna have their own personal visions of who the character is. For example, the people who grew up with Joker in the 60s and 70s will always see, Adventures of Batman Joker, like the classic animated series, or, Cesar Romero's Joker from the 60s Adam West series. They're gonna see him, that's gonna be the Joker that they see whenever they think of Joker, the more comical, goofy, wacky, less scary Joker, less scary and twisted Joker, and then people who've grown used to the Dark Knight, are always gonna see Heath Ledger's interpretation of the character, who, by the way, I'll be talking about, in the final segment of this discussion. But yeah, overall, how I like to see Joker, personally, just like how I like to see most other characters, especially Batman villains, is I always like to see him with more humanity. Now, obviously, it's really hard to see the humanity in something so seemingly inhuman, and nihilistic as Joker. It's really hard to see the humanity in that. But at the same time, it is no new thing for Batman to apply humanity to the most inhuman of villains. And this is also what makes me prefer the world of Batman over all other areas of the DC Universe, because it has that human element. And it's probably why Batman is one of the most well-known and most often talked about areas of the DC Universe. Because I always see, whenever I see a character like Joker, Mr. Freeze, Victor Zsasz, Penguin, Two-Face, Riddler, Harley Quinn, whenever I see all these villains, I always call them, Batman villains for a specific reason, because I have my own personal, definition of what makes a villain a Batman villain. Because even though every Batman villain, or well, most Batman villains, are very different from one another. There are some that are just way too similar to others out there. But what makes a Batman villain? A Batman villain for me is someone that has so many inhuman traits, but they aren't any less human than any other members of Gotham's criminal underworld. Some good Batman villains to use as analogies to Joker. Oh, you got Mr. Freeze, you got Killer Croc. None of them look human, but their appearances and their behavior and their mannerisms, those don't make them any less human than anyone else in Gotham. If you didn't read into Killer Croc's backstory and you didn't know that Killer Croc was a lonely child named Waylon Jones who was abused by his alcoholic aunt, who was neglected for years by everyone he knew, before being put into a freak show. If you didn't read into that, you would have just seen him as just a giant cannibalistic crocodile man. But then you look into his backstory and you're like, oh, it all becomes clear, it all makes sense.
Wait, I get it, the answer is clear. The darkness hides inside our very souls.
But that isn't to say that you sympathize with them on every level. You just say, no, they're a good soul. They were always, they didn't deserve this, but it's really hard to feel sympathy for them because their actions cannot be morally or legally justified. And that's also the same case for the Joker. No matter what motives they might give, or no matter what their previous traumatic experiences were, at the end of the day, they have a choice to bounce back or to continue being good people, and they just don't. But I also want to get into Joker's origin stories a little, because obviously there was no clear, canonical, or even legitimate Joker origin story. No, I'm just kidding. Alan Moore and Todd Phillips. They're the ones who made Joker's origin story. We already know his origin story, we just don't like to admit it. But no, in all honesty, Joker doesn't have any legitimate or canon origin story at this point. Even though there are 50 that have been made, and 50 and counting, considering the fact that he can never keep a straight origin story, either by the virtue of lying or just misremembering. But personally, my favorite Joker origin stories are those that try to give him more humanity, even if they do include him jumping or falling into a vat of chemicals, which, to be fair, most of them do. But there are some out there that try to treat Joker with more humanity and to try to provide motivation and causality for his crimes. And those are always my favorite, because I always love considering the fact that this monstrosity of an individual, of a supercriminal, is very much human at heart, no matter how unlikely it seems. And again, I'll get into those in just a second, into my favorite origin stories in just a second. But I guess a really interesting and intellectual way of interpreting the Joker would have to be through the controversy of nature over nurture. Now, for those who aren't aware, nature over nurture is the argument within the psychological community as to whether or not an individual is born the way they are, or they are made that way by environmental factors. Now, to be fair, it's still very much open to interpretation, but personally for me, Joker, as well as other Batman villains, fits more into the nurture category. And just to clarify, I don't want to make it seem like it's either nature over nurture all the time. Who's to say that it doesn't just depend on the individual, especially individuals who are born with some kind of psychological condition or mental illness, and those who have grown up with traumatic experiences. Now, this is a perfectly valid and understandable interpretation that many people have, which is that there are many Batman and Joker fans out there who prefer to see the Joker as having been born evil.
Some men are just born plain evil.
Now, like I said, to me it greatly depends on the individual. Sometimes they might be born with the tendency for evil hard-coded into their psychology, and then some might be made evil by the traumatic experiences that they experience throughout their lifetime, like abuse, bullying, drug addiction, etc., etc.
I think it's this land that makes the men, as much as the other way around. Men are born, and then they're formed. At least that's how I see it.
To be fair, there is quite a bit of credence to the theory that environmental factors are what turn the Joker into the Joker, because it should be noted that my vision of the Joker as a character was heavily transformed after seeing both Todd Phillips' Joker movie and also a lovely video uploaded 3, 4, 5 years ago. I'll be honest, thanks to my YouTube channel and the coronavirus pandemic, the years have just kind of faded together over time, so now, to be honest, that video could have been released like 3, 5, 18 years ago. Who really knows at this point? It could have been any of those. But this was a lovely video produced, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years ago by a great YouTuber named Ryan Hollinger. He is a brilliant and very intellectual film critic from Ireland. I would totally recommend his channel to any of you out there with very strong stomachs, because a lot of the stuff he talks about is very messed up. A lot of the movies he talks about. But if you want a very small, very deep intellectual interpretation on lots of horror content, lots of horror films, short horror stories, I would totally recommend him. But about 3 or 4 years ago, he released a video that aimed to humanize Joker in the Batman Arkham game series. This really helped me, and this video of his really helped me think deeper into the character of the Joker, into a closer visage of how I see him today. Thanks to that video, and thanks to Joker's origin story in Todd Phillips' Joker movie, I see Joker nowadays as being a very pathetic, lonely, desperate man who wants all of the spotlight. He wants the world to be a stage. I mean, at this point, a basic fundamental building block to Joker's character is that he wants to be remembered. He wants to build a legacy for himself. And just as icing on the cake, he is also an attention-seeking prick. And that also draws parallels between him and real-life psychopaths and serial killers. You know, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, men like that. And just like those men, Joker has many very realistic serial killer motivations, like a need for power, a need for control. He's a thrill seeker. You know, he enjoys the thrill of the hunt. And yeah, those are basic aspects of the Joker's character, which really help show that there is a lot of humanity to be seen in someone so seemingly so inhuman. You know, as fun as it is just going over the basic elements of Joker's character, I do want to go over his origin stories a bit before transitioning into the final segment of this discussion. So, it's important to note that Joker's had about 50 to 50 million origin stories in the past. You know, somewhere in there, I don't really know. But I'm just gonna go over those a little. You had his original, 1951, origin story by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. the original creators of Batman, you had the 2008 retelling of his story in Batman Lovers and Madmen, which featured Joker as a madman named Jack, who was a thrill seeker, who constantly wreaked havoc and killed people to gain the Batman's attention. Then you had his origin story as Red Hood 1 in Batman Zero Year from Snyder and Capullo's New 52 Batman run. And of course, there's the very memorable Tim Burton 1989 origin story in which Jack Nicholson's Joker was Jack Napier, who was just like a low-level, low-class thug, who fell into a vat of chemicals at Ace Chemicals. So that's probably one of the origin stories people remember the most. Despite all the varying origin stories, there are a few recurring themes throughout those origin stories. A, you have his Red Hood identity. B, you have him falling into vats or pools of toxic chemicals. And C, you have him being like a low-level thug or a thrill seeker or just some kind of miserable individual. And, you know, those are just the general hallmarks of Joker's previous origin stories. But even then, my two favorite Joker origin stories throughout the character's history, one of them being a classic and the other being particularly recent. And I'm just going to go over those briefly because those two are some of his most original and human origin stories, and were two of the only Joker origin stories that have sought to portray him as more of a well-intentioned, mentally ill individual who was pushed over the edge by various traumatic experiences. Now, on the slight off chance that you're somehow unfamiliar with the classic of those two, you might want to take a better look at the t-shirt I've been wearing this whole time. Yeah, it's never ceased to surprise me that the Killing Joke is as legendary and beloved as it is. A, it gave Joker his most complex and relatable backstory since his debut in 1940. B, it permanently scarred a key member of the Bat family with a crippling disability. And C, it beautifully and accurately portrays Batman and Joker's relationship as complex and deadly as it is. Now, I'll try not to get too much into the nitty-gritty of his Killing Joke backstory, but unlike the grungy mobster or thrill seeker that other backstories have portrayed him as, in the Killing Joke, Joker was originally a common, everyday working man, probably with some form of mental illness, who's absolutely desperate to move him and his pregnant wife Jeannie into a better neighborhood. Sadly, after deciding to cooperate with two mobsters in robbing a playing card company, just so he can have the necessary funds for him and his wife to move out, his wife dies under sudden and tragic circumstances. But the two men being scummy mobsters, they don't let him back out.
That was never going to end well.
When Joker tries leading the two men through the chemical plant he used to work at, the two men are shot dead by security, and Joker finds himself evading Batman's clutches. Consequently, he falls into a pool of chemicals, and strangely enough, Batman just leaves him to his fate. After crawling out of the pool with absolutely nothing left to hold on to, Joker discovers his new face and slowly begins to embrace his newfound identity in the iconic final shot of his backstory. I mean, sure, he still takes the chemical bath, and he still wears his Red Hood disguise when he's leading the men to the playing card company. But at the same time, The Killing Joke was the first Joker origin story to treat the character as unmistakably human and relatable. And, in addition, Joker manages to prove through his horrid treatment toward the Gordon family that the only thing that separates him from the rest of the world is one bad day.
I've proven my point. Gordon's been driven mad. I've demonstrated there's no difference between me and everyone else. All it takes is one bad day. That's how far the world is from where I am. Just one bad day.
Now, it's very necessary to note that Joker's origin story in The Killing Joke may not have been his actual backstory, because, as he puts it, sometimes I remember it one way, sometimes I remember it another. But after all, if I'm gonna have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice. As a little side note, just in case any of you are confused on why I haven't been showing a lot of clips from the Killing Joke animated film, it's because I really don't have any interest in it. And no, that isn't because of the Batgirl segment that was added on to pad the runtime, but instead because of the art style. The Killing Joke's original art style was extremely realistic, and all of the faces Barbara makes throughout Joker's torture are extremely hard to look at. While in the animated film, they all just look kind of blank and, no offense, a bit too anime-like. The same goes for Joker in his flashback sequences, as he just doesn't have the same looks of shame and agony like he does in the original comic. But, again, that's just me. Now, what's my second favorite Joker origin story? I'll give you 3 hints. A, it's heart-wrenching. B, there's no chemical bath. And C, after seeing it once, That's Life by Frank Sinatra will never stop playing in your head.
I used to think that my life was a tragedy. But now I realize it's a comedy.
Now, I'll be going over my own personal feelings on Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix's Joker in the final segment of this discussion, which thankfully we're getting very close to, not to mention that it's extremely hard to talk about this movie's plot without spoilers. So, let me just put it to you this way. Arthur Fleck is a deeply mentally disturbed clown-turned-comedian who is beaten down, ignored, fired from his favorite job, and even made fun of by his lifelong hero. After discovering a shocking family secret, he begins to lose touch with all of reality as he embraces his supercriminal identity, the Joker. Woo! Wrap that up nicely. But in all honesty, Joker is an extremely upsetting film, and there's a lot of stuff in it that many people out there simply cannot take on a personal level. But other than that, I totally recommend it. And on that note, let's move on to the final segment, ladies and gentlemen. Looks like it's about that time, folks. Time for me to rank all of Joker's live-action interpretations from best to worst. Oh, and by the way, yes, you may unleash that angry mob now. Now, personally, it's difficult for me to rank Joker's live-action interpretations just one way, as there are many ways that I would rank them, like by acting performances, for example. So naturally, the ranking method I'll be using in this video will be overall, I guess? Yeah, let's go with that. From best to worst, they are as follows. Joaquin Phoenix, Jack Nicholson, Cesar Romero, Jared Leto, and Heath Ledger.
Oh, fuck off!
Wait. Hold on, folks. I have my reasons. Now, first of all, let me just reiterate my point by saying that I would rank these Joker interpretations in many different ways. If I was ranking them by acting performance, for instance, I would rank Jared Leto just above or just below Cesar Romero, and Heath Ledger would come as a very close second to Joaquin Phoenix. In terms of how he plays Joker in The Dark Knight, he gets an A+. In terms of how he plays Joker in general, however, he gets a C for me. Now, many people would openly refute my interpretation by saying, oh, but like you said at the beginning of the video, he's mysterious, he's like an anomaly, and he can never keep a clear backstory. And yes, that is absolutely true about Heath Ledger's Joker, even though that's also true about Joaquin Phoenix's Joker in a number of ways that I will not spoil. But just keep in mind that Ledger's interpretation of Joker described himself as an anarchist and an agent of chaos out to prove a point about society.
Introduce a little anarchy. Upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos. I'm an agent of chaos.
Now, although it might seem like it would be satisfying to me as a fan of The Killing Joke,
I've proven my point. Gordon's been driven mad. I've demonstrated there's no difference between me and everyone else.
it actually kind of frustrates me a little because it almost gives off the impression that Christopher Nolan only read The Killing Joke before directing The Dark Knight, even though I can't validate this, as there were many comics that influenced The Dark Knight, as Joker typically seeks to find pleasure in chaos as opposed to trying to prove a point through it, which is a trait that I see much more in Joaquin Phoenix's version of the character.
Okay, I think I might understand that you did this to start a movement, to become a symbol.
Come on, Murray. Do I look like the kind of clown that could start a movement?
So that's it, you're crazy. That's your defense for killing 3 young men?
No. They couldn't carry a tune to save their lives. Oh, why is everybody so upset about these guys?
As for my second reason of why I decided to rank Heath Ledger's Joker so low, while his Joker is undeniably terrifying, which is a pretty common trait of the Joker, he's not scary in the way that Joker is supposed to be scary. As in order to make Joker scary, you need to have a balanced contrast between wacky and sadistic. Now, a fairly common response to that point would be, oh, okay, so you think that every single version of Joker should be wacky and charismatic? And my response would be, yes. Yes, I do. Okay, now just to establish some context, let's start out simple. Why are so many people afraid of clowns? The answer is simple, and it's their unintentional scariness. What's supposed to come off as wacky and friendly comes off as fake and menacing. That is why coulrophobia, the fear of clowns, is so prevalent, because of that unsettling contrast between friendly and menacing. And that is why whimsy is such a vital component to what makes the Joker scary. But it's not just that Joker is so goofy that he's scary like a regular clown. Sure, he unmistakably comes off as comical and whimsical to the uninformed, but at the same time, he's a man that gets his kicks from horrible, horrible things. The ultimate downfall of Heath Ledger's Joker for me is that he's missing that vital whimsy and the equally vital contrast. Now, while I'm never gonna pretend that aspects of his appearance couldn't work in some capacity, especially considering Lee Bermejo's Joker took inspiration from it, It's just downright laughable to me that anybody could see somebody who looks like this as a clown.
Enough from the clown!
Granted, that does make it a lot harder for me to see that jokery contrast in Jared Leto's Joker, but at least he has plenty of energy, charisma, and Joker shtick, if you want to put it that way. As a matter of fact, I never even had that many problems with the aesthetic design of Leto's Joker, as he was just as much of high-class gangster Joker with tattoos and grills as Heath Ledger's Joker was hopeless downbeat goth Joker. As for the other live-action interpretations, Cesar Romero's Joker was way more kid-friendly, but still had that same jokery contrast.
If they do not see the joke, put in the ropes and let them choke!
Jack Nicholson's Joker had that balance and contrast to the nines.
That's good work. The skulls, the bodies, you give it all such a glow. I don't know if it's art, but I like it.
And Joaquin Phoenix's Joker developed energy and whimsy while also having a cold, sadistic nature. I mean, don't sit there and tell me that you can't feel the spirit of Joker in these scenes.
Stop laughing, you freak. This isn't fun.
Yeah, the whole fucking city's on fire because of what you did.
All units, fire reported north of Alley, code 4 for medical.
I know. Isn't it beautiful?
Wow. I've never felt so profoundly disturbed yet emotionally satisfied.
What can I say? I'm a charmer.
Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my discussion of the Joker. Like I said before, if your favorite interpretation of Joker is Heath Ledger's, all power to you. We all have our own visions of who the Joker is, and it takes an overanalyzing contrarian like me not to admire Heath Ledger's outstanding performance, especially after the actor's unfortunate suicide. At the end of the day, Joker is a fascinating comic book villain who borders so much on being supernatural, otherworldly, or even metaphorical, yet who benefits so much from being given a little humanity. But really, at the end of the day, fuck that guy.
I'll never let you win. Never.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
I wanna go and play and ride my cares away. Gonna live it up till dark, 'cause it's a perfect day in my amusement park. All your dreams come true and everything is on for you.
See you soon, bats.
But if there's nothing shaking come this here July, I'm gonna roll myself up in a big ball and